largely felt like an oratory with visual aids, which I weighed very heavily in this event.
The Texans don't.
For a
like
higher
us.
rank for me, informative speaking needs to be free from argument. We split ranks based on this as a primary factor. Each speaker who did not present an argument ranked above those who did.
You guys busy?
Yes, I am.
No, I
Anyhow.
have the lesson you reading.
Can I ask my rating?
No, go away.
Oh, we can't tell you, sorry.
What?
What is this?
Nothing. I don't know what that is. Admit and then admit the children, I guess, into your Zoom.
What?
Oh, your mic's on. Your mic's on in your Zoom.
Hi, Anna.
Okay, is there anybody from TAB in here?
Yep. How can I help you?
Just wondering who else is a judge.
The other two people that are other than me in here are judges too.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Are you Roxy?
I'm Roxy.
Hi, Roxy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm in Indiana. Where are you?
I'm in Minnesota.
Okay. Cold up there, huh?
It's cold.
Yeah, it's cold here too.
Yeah, but that's
What are you gonna do? So what
it
it's
is.
winter in the Midwest. What are you gonna do?
It's winter.
This is an event that we don't have in Indiana, so they can read off notes.
Yes. NSDA asked them to be memorized, I think. Anna, you have to help. And in Minnesota, they can use their script.
But it is an extemp. They just got they're working on it now. Okay.
No. This is informative. So this is a done deal. So this is informative speaking.
Oh, then, okay. I misread the thing then.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me make sure I'm in the right room.
It says
I
verse.
think when you open the Zoom says extemp, but the round should say, like on the page, should say informative.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, final.
It's a little
varsity
confusing there.
informative. Yeah, it
Yeah.
says it there. Okay.
Yep. It said extemp probably when you open the Zoom.
That's
chat.
okay. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm fairly easily confused.
Don't worry, I had the same thing. I was like, info.
Well, see, and I didn't even see it there. I just saw it on my other ballot.
I
probably have the same question as you guys. So are we doing info or extemp reading?
It's informative.
I thought it was informative.
Okay.
Okay. It just, yeah, when I clicked on the Zoom meeting, it said like extemp reading finals, but I think it's just a mismatch.
Okay.
And then I've not done a final before. So does the host, is the host the one that brings the kids in then, or is that up to somebody else?
You know, I've never done it online either. I've only done it in person.
I think they're all going to start showing up here. So they're all going to be in the Zoom. So we'll just call on them.
Okay.
There's a few kids who I think are double entered, so they might come in and out a little bit.
Okay.
But for the most part, everybody will be here.
Okay.
I have a question. Is this info finals? Because the label on the Zoom said extemp.
Yes.
I had the same question. I think you're in the right place.
Okay.
We're just trying to stress you out. Psych, this is extemp draw.
Yeah.
Oh, we're on Zoom now? Oh, look at that. Switch to Zoom.
I'm guessing it's because they might want to live stream it, but I can't be sure.
That makes sense.
I noticed that we have 4 people who are double entered.
And it looks
We
like
may-
Jonah is in 3 of them, 3 events.
Oh, Lord.
Once
Cecilia.
Once we have everyone get here, we can take roll, because I don't think everyone's probably in 3 finals.
Oh, maybe that's just from the beginning.
They don't change for finals.
Reagan, you've done this before.
I've done a few of these, yeah.
So I'm voting you as the boss of me.
Yeah, we're going to elect her chairman.
Sounds good. I think we're still waiting on another judge. There's 4 of us right now, right?
Yeah, it says there were 5.
Yeah.
Also, I know it says I'm in 3, but I'm only in 2 because one of them's duo and it's asynchronous. So I don't have to actually go to that room.
Very cool.
We should have contestants turn their cameras off until everybody's here.
Yeah, and I think with Zoom, we can all probably keep our cameras on the whole time. It has better video.
Oh, all right.
function, I
Okay.
think. I don't know. Let me see. Jason, are you a judge?
I am, but for whatever. So I'm working on that.
Okay.
It says varsity informative, and I gather that's not what this is.
Oh no, this is informative.
Oh, it is.
Yes, the link was labeled incorrectly when you
Okay,
open
cool.
it.
Then I'm good. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Okay. I guess we'll wait till exactly to start the round, just since we probably have some people live streaming or joining in. I don't want parents to miss anything.
How's the weather out there, y'all?
Well, in Indiana, it's pretty cold. I think it's about 8 right now.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. Where are you?
I'm in Seattle. It's raining like hell.
Doesn't it always?
No,
Oh,
we just tell people that.
I'm in Minneapolis and it's cold here for sure.
I was just texting with Pam earlier. I feel bad. This will be like the first year in 15 we haven't had a dinner after this tournament. So she owes me Manny's Steakhouse.
That's a good treat.
Yes, it is.
Every time I walk in there, I feel like I'm walking right into Death of a Salesman.
Yeah, right. When I go out to visit, I always try and stay at that hotel so I don't have to walk very far to the hotel bar.
Go right down.
Yeah. The room service is phenomenal.
Oh, shoot, yeah. Everything kind of in that whole area is phenomenal.
my daughter lived in Minneapolis for a year while she was doing her internship. So we went up there a few times. We went to the state fair, and that was simply outstanding.
It's the best. Yeah. The Minnesota State Fair is.
It wasn't until after I did some checking, and apparently it's like one of the top 3 state fairs in the whole country.
Yeah.
I need
missed
another
it
bucket
this
of
year.
cookies.
They had
They'd be really good today, wouldn't they? Some Sweet Martha's cookies would be good today, wouldn't
Oh
they?
my God, they gave us the bucket and it was still hot.
Yeah, it's awesome.
There were 42 of them just like wedged together at the bottom.
They did this thing this year where if you were able to get a ticket, you could drive through the fairgrounds with your mask on, of course. And then you could purchase the food from the different vendors. So I got to go to that and they got to make a little money too, which is nice.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I have bad knees and I didn't care. I walked all over the joint.
Deep fried everything, I think.
Well, yeah, it's a state fair.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take a roll and we can get started like 1 minute early or right on time. Okay, is U4 Maria here?
Yep, me.
Okay, cool. And you're not double entered. And then P2 Jonah. Yes, and you said you are double entered still in finals. Okay, cool. And then I2, Sam. I'm not seeing a Sam. P4, Cecilia. Yes.
Hi.
And are you double entered?
I'm not, no.
No. Okay. And then J4, Margaret. Looks like they are not here. They may be double entered. And then I4, Lucy. Yes. And are you double entered? No. Okay. We'll go ahead and start with Jonah since he's double entered, has to get to his next round. And then we'll start back up at the top, if that's okay with everybody. Just so he can get to his next. Yeah. Seeing lots of head nods. Okay, cool. Okay, well, with that, I'm gonna just ask everyone to go on mute, and then if all the judges are ready, Jonah, you can start whenever you are also ready.
Hold on.
Okay, hold on.
Who's gonna keep time?
I plan to keep time if you guys all want to keep time, or I can keep time and we can say it after if that.
We'll go with yours.
Okay, cool. Sweet. Yeah, just whenever you're ready then.
Cool. A hot evening in August, I received a letter. The thesis, curb appeal. Dear neighbor, I am writing on behalf of the community, but specifically my family. Your lawn has gotten out of control. Your clover has run into my yard and the crabgrass is just insulting. My child asks me every day if you are on a vacation. Soon I will have to tell her the truth. My darling, they are on a vacation of the soul, blah, 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 stuff about property value and siting. Sincerely, disappointed. Okay, so the message of the letter was loud and clear. Lawns are deeply rooted in America. According to the Wisconsin State Journal, Americans spend more than $29.1 billion on lawn care annually. Lawns are a statement about our societal values. Today, we will examine how the lawn communicates our values historically, socially, and environmentally. Okay, so I think I know why my neighbors speak and write in such a medieval tone, and it's because that's how the lawn originated. A majority of the first lawns were around medieval castles in France and Britain. Their use? Beauty. Just kidding. The grass acts stood for purpose. According to the Planet Natural Research Center, the lawn was a safety measure and was first defined as the area around a castle that guards and knights patrolled. A place clear of trees, plants, or anything that would obstruct the view of approaching, possibly hostile visitors. But the lawn quickly shifted purposes. Many people in Europe saw the lawn as beautiful, an entertainment center, a place to sip wine and eat French bread. Ooh, hey. So that's what it became. Planet Natural continues that when these Europeans started colonizing America, they brought both the idea of the lawn and the grass seeds to create it for a lot of different reasons. Beauty, of course, but also livestock. Grass in early America was actually called buffalo grass and was harmful to any animal that consumed it. So they brought their grass. According to The Insider, this was the best new grass to raise animals in the New World. And it's the reason for our thick cows. After World War II is when the obsession with lawns in America exploded. Along with babies. Well, babies didn't explode, but you know, boom! The first development that highlighted the lawn was Levittown, the American dream. Literally just a suburb, but the first. The company Levitt & Sons, who specialized in mass production, was given a perfect opportunity to raise money with a huge increase in families needing homes. This led to the company buying a 7 square stretch mile of land to then mass produce homes. And their new feature, lawns. A welcoming place where you can eat, play, run, jump, and mow. In reality, this wasn't the case. The lawn became the symbol of an American dream that is valued by most. but attainable only to some. Today, most of America, like my neighbors, define our value by the way our yards look. Lawns have become a social issue, and in some cases so intense that we now police yards regularly. Lawn and order. Meet Joe, a 66-year-old man from Florida who, according to his neighbors, just couldn't properly maintain his lawn. Even after sodding 3 times and hiring a group of professionals, his lawn was still not up to par according to his local homeowners association. And ultimately, this led to city officials threatening him with jail time. The only option he was given was time behind the bars. Joe was held without bail. But Joe's story isn't the only one with police involvement. In fact, it gets more and more outrageous as time goes on. Since I've been in high school, the trend for white people to call the police on people of color for doing normal everyday tasks in yards has finally gotten national attention. Meet Reggie Fields, a 12-year-old entrepreneur who started his own lawn mowing business. One afternoon, while mowing for a client, Reggie accidentally started to mow a minuscule part of the neighbor's lawn. The neighbor, Linda Kirkor's response? Dialing 911. The cops showed up, and while Linda complained to the officer about the look of her lawn, it was clear that the call was more so motivated by the color of Reggie's skin. Linda cared more about her lawn than the well-being of Reggie. Over the past 18 years, Linda has made over 60 calls to the police regarding similar instances on lawns and public parks. Moreover, across the largest area of grass, golf courses, the owner of a Philadelphia golf course followed 5 black women who paid for a round of golf, threatening them, and ultimately calling 911 because the women weren't golfing fast enough. The Washington Post in May 2020 states, New Jersey, Minnesota, Oregon, and Washington have recently considered bills that would criminalize calling the police when crimes haven't occurred. Some specifying these calls that unlawfully discriminate and target protected classes. Something else we don't protect, Earth. According to NASA, 200 gallons of fresh drinking water a day per person would be needed to keep all American lawns in acceptable condition. And that's excluding rainfall. I mean, watering a crop that we can't harvest is totally more important than using the water to drink. Flint, Michigan still doesn't have clean water. But apparently, the average American uses 73,000 gallons of water a year per lawn. If just 60 of us stop watering our lawn for just 1 year, each of the 96,000 residents of Flint could have clean drinking water for up to 13 months. And that's from NASA. We trust science. Additionally, according to Gizmodo, one lawnmower emits the same amount of pollution in 1 hour as 40 automobiles driving for the same time. Moreover, the EPA estimates that we spill up to 17 million gallons of gasoline while filling our lawnmowers. That is more than the oil dumped by the Exxon Valdez. And that's just in 1 year. You might ask, Jonah, are these the only bad things we're causing by our obsession with Stepford-esque lawns? No. Perhaps the most terrifying, the National Coalition Against the Misuse of Pesticides reports that of 30 commonly used lawn pesticides, 12 are linked with birth defects, 14 with neurotoxicity, 16 are linked with cancer, 17 with disruption of the hormonal system, and 25 with liver or kidney damage. But wait, there's more. 14 to 30 are toxic to mammals, 20 have the ability to leach into drinking water sources, 22 are toxic to birds, 29 are toxic to bees, and all 30 are toxic to fish and other aquatic organisms vital to our ecosystem. Thanks, lawns. To combat the use of toxic and harsh chemicals, one company has developed an alternative: paint. Meet Extreme Green Grass, a company based out of California, one of the places in need of an alternative due to the intense droughts being faced. The company manufactures a non-toxic spray solution that turns dead brown grass green. Other places around the country have had campaigns to replace a lawn with a garden, landscape rocks, drought-tolerant, or other indigenous plants. Because this non-native green plant is no longer cool. After examining how the lawn communicates our values historically, socially, and environmentally, it is clear that the seeds planted long ago have grown and evolved with the American landscape. But how we treat our lawns does not need to dictate how we treat our world or our neighbors. But since I'm petty, dear neighbors, get off my grass. Sincerely, hopeful.
Great job. Thanks.
And can I head to my other round?
Yes.
Awesome,
And
thank you.
congrats on making it to finals.
Thank
I
you.
forgot to say that earlier. Good luck. Oh, the time was 9:26. Okay. Is everyone ready to go on to our next speaker? Yes. I'm seeing lots of yeses. Okay. Up next, we have U4 Maria.
Right, and for whoever's timing, could I please have a fist at 10 if I get there?
Yes. Yep, I can do that, and I'll be timing. So yes. And go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
When I was little, my sister scarred me for life by showing me the music video for the French song Papa Ute. Never took French. In the video, a boy laments that his father doesn't pay attention to him. Oh, I should mention, the father is an inanimate doll made of wax. Yeah. Anyway, the boy goes out to his yard to dance alone, imagining his father is with him, while the father watches from his car, which he drove who knows how. Finally, the boy himself turns to wax. Real kid-friendly programming. Surprisingly, what seemed the most eerie to me at the time was the boy's cul-de-sac. It had tiny pink houses with flower boxes and a claustrophobic yellow sky. It felt like a creepy suburban nightmare. And I thought to myself, hey, I live in a cul-de-sac. So much for going outdoors. The suburbs have long been famous for this idyllic sameness. But while we might think this seemingly simple uniformity and middle-class lifestyle is easy enough to grasp, it is essential that we understand the area which, as Business Insider notes on October 26, 2020, has come to define and drive our nation's political, economic, and social systems. So today, let's first take a drive through the history of suburbs and who they're meant to attract. Second, we'll take a look at who the suburbs were meant to keep out, as well as their many impacts, before finally putting an offer in on some implications. Because as Forward argues on August 26, 2020, the suburbs can either be the American dream or its worst nightmare. The first American suburb was founded in 1947 on Long Island, New York, in a community called Levittown. And if it looked like only racist white people lived here, it's because they did. More on that later. In a global sense, the suburbs have existed since ancient Rome. In his book, The Suburbium of Rome, Professor Edward Chaplin describes Roman regions called suburbanitas, which were not so much areas as they were loose personal concepts. And yet, Roman suburbanitas had something in common with the Americans who created Levittown. White dudes who liked to control women, because that's exactly who the suburbs were created for. When the suburbs were invented, women who could afford these houses were given more control of their home life. A large house, large yard, good schools, and the flexibility to have both a home life and a career. However, according to Dr. Kimberly Katz-Elliott, only 30% of American women in the 1950s had jobs outside of the home, largely because women were told to embrace the domestic life, which sounded great if you had a wealthy husband who could float that life for you. And if you didn't, the conversation explains on April 17th, 2018, apartments in urban centers were the only alternative. And here, women are at a severe disadvantage. City zoning separates work, shopping, and housing, making errands and childcare a struggle. Safe parks, affordable childcare facilities, and healthy food are often too far away to be a viable option for working class mothers. And according to the 2017 National Crime Victims' Rights Week Resource Guide, urban areas account for 55% of rape and sexual assault, while suburban areas account for only 35%. Because, as the conversation notes, cities were designed by men, and as a result, they were designed for men. And so were suburbs, leading social psychologist William Sharp to argue the suburban dream wasn't just wealth and some land with a fence. It was a husband who had complete control over where his wife was and when. But the suburb boom had a second effect: sprawl. According to Scientific American on February 12, 2020, with the purposely spacious and cul-de-sac-ridden layout of the suburbs, it takes more driving to get anywhere, and greenhouse gas emissions soar. But recently, as suburbia experiences a high demand for urbanization, developers are turning to urban systems, like the grid system. This change could help solve the problem, but it might not be enough. As The Garden explains on July 21st, 2020, in some suburban areas, the large, wealthy homes of the affluent create up to 15 times more greenhouse gas emissions than their poorer neighboring areas. Meaning, suburbanites are not only creating a funding gap in public utilities, they're also consuming the resources of the area. So how did they get there? Well, in his book, The Color of Law, author Richard Rothstein explains modern suburbs took off after the Great Depression as part of FDR's New Deal to rebuild the economy, with the Federal Housing Administration essentially paying for population movement out of cities and into suburbs. But housing loans had to be federally insured, which meant buyers needed to not be risky to determine who qualified. They used color-coded maps. Areas shaded green were labeled safe investments. Areas shaded red were, you guessed it, too risky. Because these were the areas where people of color lived. This practice was known as redlining, and it meant Black people couldn't get homes in the suburbs, with the loans even expressly forbidding lending to Black families. A practice which eventually led to a massive wealth gap between white and Black families, and white and Black neighborhoods. As USA Today posits on June 23rd, 2020, this is the reason schools are more segregated now than they were in 1954. The result? A system which the Smithsonian Magazine argues on May 30th, 2017, might be better called an American apartheid, masquerading the most influential example of institutional racism as the American dream. Over the last decade, the line between cities and suburbs has blurred. According to the New York Times on September 15th, 2017, millennials, particularly those of color, who were previously city inhabitants, are increasingly moving away from the more dense areas as they have kids, choosing the burb life for its housing affordability and open spaces, especially with COVID's need for distance. To combat this, urban spaces are undergoing a suburban renewal. But as more affluent groups choose to move into cities, others are forced to move out, which might sound like gentrification, because it is. And its increase in the cost of living in the revitalized areas, such that the original inhabitants can no longer afford to live there. In other words, suburbia is now encroaching on cities, not just in how they look, but also in how they treat and mistreat communities of color. And the race dynamic doesn't stop there. As NPR suggests on April 11, 2018, the institutionalized concentration of Black populations to urban communities has another effect. the ability for racial profiling to hide behind spatial profiling. And as 538 explains, the outcry over high-profile police shootings has led many big cities to increase use of force restrictions, decreasing urban police killings of unarmed racial minorities by nearly 30% since 2013. However, at the same time, police killings are increasing in suburban and rural areas because these areas haven't yet pushed to enact change. However, those communities that have are flourishing. For example, as Bloomberg of October 3rd, 2014 points out, Oak Park outside of Chicago has started addressing racial issues within the community, promoting racially balanced neighborhoods. Their community now views diversity as an asset, dubbing this the diverse suburb movement. So perhaps suburbia's greatest impact isn't its issues, but rather its potential for change. And in the process, shifting from constructing sameness to sustaining diversity. According to this year's election exit polls, 51% of voters reported living in a suburb. And while many news outlets treated these voters like a homogenous group, the actual polling was all over the place. And as the Brookings Institution notes, this unpredictability changed the face of the election. Clearly, suburbs are more than meets the eye, and they're still changing. Today, we took a look at the history of suburbs and who they're meant to attract, their discrimination and exclusion, and finally, their impacts on our world today. Our dialogue on the struggles of the idea of the modern American dream must begin with the concept that created it, suburbia. Or, as they say in French, banlieue?
Thank you, dear.
Great job, thanks. And the time on that was 9:48. Let's see, looks like Sam is here now. Yes. Are all the judges ready for? All right, cool. Looks like you're still on mute.
Can everyone see and hear me all right?
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna go on mute and you can go ahead and start whenever you're ready. Did you want time signals at all?
No, thank you.
Okay, cool.
I just want to let you guys know I never used to be this fabulous. Back when I was in the closet, I didn't allow myself to express my individuality. But the second I came out, boy, did I realize I had so much more room for extravagance. I started to buy anything that I deemed perfectly ugly. This meant some outfits were a cascade of colors that by no means matched. Others were a jumble of patterns, usually paired with lobster pants. And yes, I wore them to school. No outfit was ever enough. There was always something I could add to make it a little more zesty. But it was these outfits that defined me. And it wasn't until last year that I realized this style had a name: camp. And no, I am not talking about summer camp. Camp as a style is defined by New York Times journalist Bonnie Moore as an overtopness with an extremely off quality. Understanding camp and its impact on communities around the world help us better understand the ways community and identity are formed. So today, let's start with the basics and define what camp is. Next, let's add a little glitter to the history of camp And finally, let's top it all off with what political movements camp has influenced. Because, as Oscar Wilde once said, you can never be overdressed. So first, let's define what camp is. Camp doesn't have a concrete definition, which makes it extremely difficult. Susan Sontag, the one who first put this concept into words, said it best when she defined it as artificial, serious, and passionate. It changes drastically from person to person, but there's still a base idea. You know, when you see it, camp is a way of looking at the world and redefining what is seen as normal. It's an exaggeration of stereotypes in order to defy or completely destroy them. Camp is a performance, a state of mind. This is why drag queens have become such a good example of camp at its very core. The overly feminine persona they present, the general attitude that they hold, their presence, is the definition of camp. These people exaggerate their identities or the stereotypes people place on them in such a flamboyant way that it's obviously meant to be a social system. This is where people at the 2019 Met Gala went wrong. The theme of that year's gala was camp. And this is what most of the participants showed up in. Their outfits were clearly designed by someone who thought to be camp was only to be tacky and artificial. There was no performance from them. But when Billy Porter arrived, carried in on a palanquin, he showed them all wrong. Not only was his outfit camp, but his attitude was too. Sontag goes on to say that camp is the love of the unnatural and exaggeration. It's not used to describe one thing, but everything. A building can be campy, or a person, or even a novel. Oscar Wilde's writings are considered camp. CR fashion book writer Jennifer Sauer explains that Oscar Wilde embodied camp so well that Susan Sontag based her revolutionary essay, Notes on Camp, around him. If you look at his works, there are some very obvious homoerotic themes throughout them. For example, in his famous book, A Picture of Dorian Gray, the artist that painted the portrait of Dorian was very obviously gay for him. These themes at the time were considered highly immoral, so they can be considered camp, since to write about them so extravagantly was an act of defiance. So, how long has camp been around? Camp actually has a surprisingly long history. The first instance camp is seen is as early as the 1600s with King Louis XIV. That's right, King Louis was an absolute queen. I mean, just look at that outfit. Even the pose, with one leg in front and a hand on your hip, became a major symbol for camp at the time. Elena Steingrad writes that he even called himself the Sun King, after the god Apollo. The theme of this Greek god could be seen throughout his court in Versailles. The sun god's emblem was worked into portraits, architecture, and even the landscaping. If that's not camp, I don't know what is. Now, this may lead some to believe that King Louis was gay. However, camp didn't become associated with queer culture until the Victorian era. It was during this time that cross-dressing became a problem for society. Sauer writes that famed cross-dressers like Frederick Park and Ernest Bolston were put on trial at this time for their campy attire because they were suspected of being queer. It was this love of feminine style and attitude in male cross-dressers that made camp symbolic of the queer community. From this point forward, to be camp was to be queer. This meant camp had to exist as an underground community. After over a century of hiding this subculture, the NYC ball scene finally brought this lifestyle to light. It was during this time that the term drag was coined. Drag was considered a performative critique of gender, so it went hand in hand with camp. However, they're not one in the same. Camp is an umbrella term, much like the term gay. Drag falls underneath this umbrella, so it's a much more specific part of the term. Much like how I'm a lesbian, which is a much more specific part of being gay. The NYC ball scene wasn't just about performance and exaggeration, but it was also about defiance. And that is the core of camp, a willful defiance of definitions, of limitations. Camp is the way many queer people identify their communities and signal to others that they belong. So ultimately, we have to ask, why does this matter? Well, camp has actually had a lot of influence on both queer and political movements. Camp is used by people in the LGBTQ community in many ways. This can range from trying to express themselves and their identity, or, as Joanna King put in her article, camp, to legitimize queer culture by promoting form over content, or aesthetics over morals. In other words, who cares if you think I'm living an immoral lifestyle? I look fabulous. Camp isn't just a presentation for others to gawk at, but it's a tool with which to build queer identity and protect queer identity from the mainstream. When I dress in a bunch of colors and patterns, I am daring people to tell me that I look bad. There is power in the silliness that is camp. But queer people by no means have a monopoly on camp. Looking at the current political climate, we can see camp everywhere. Not even the most die-hard Republican is safe from camp. Sauer writes that in moments when our culture is polarized or unstable, camp comes to the fore to comment, and this election has been no exception. Spencer Kornhaber, a journalist for The Atlantic, writes that Trump is indeed camp, and has been since 2015 when he first introduced his campaign. This man rode in on an escalator to introduce his campaign. And as his campaign continued, it just got more extravagant from there. The way Trump speaks and acts as a politician is by no means conventional. And he goes out of his way to create a performance that subverts all expectations. That's camp. Take his followers, like this lovely gentleman known as the QAnon shaman, seen at the Capitol on January 6th. The outfit, the behavior, they're playing into stereotypes the same way drag queens do. That's right. Trump's followers are basically drag queens in camo. Who wants to tell them? Camp can be seen everywhere. Not only does it have an odd and non-specific definition or a long and winding history, but it has much more influence over us than we may have realized. It has influenced countless moments in history, and it's created a way for LGBTQ+ people to express themselves and their identity. Camp might not be a conventionally pretty sight, but it does hold a lot of significance to a lot of people. So, add some final touches to your outfit and saunter on out into society, because no one can tell you you don't look fabulous.
Great job, thanks. I got 9:21 for the time on that one. Okay, we will continue going down the line. Up next, we have P4 Cecilia. I guess, are all the judges ready? Yes. Okay, cool.
And
yes. I guess you are a little bit quiet, but also maybe that's just my volume. Is it okay for everybody else?
I can speak a little louder too.
Yep, that's better. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and go on mute, and you can start with.
Turning 5 was a big deal in my house. I got to sleep on the top bunk, got to take the training wheels off my bike, and I got my first job. Several jobs, that is. This was my chore chart. Every day, the same tasks. Wash dishes, feed dog, make bed, but at the end of the day, an unseen job was added to the list. A job from the job jar. This is where my understanding of invisible work began. Now, I thought it was invisible because I couldn't see the job that was written on the little piece of paper. Wash dog and kid prints off windows. And that was one of the good ones. But today, the term invisible work has a much more significant meaning. The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development defines invisible work as the unpaid household tasks that keep society running, such as routine housework, shopping for household goods, and caring for children or the elderly. The journalist Heather Marco sums it up like this. It's tasks such as scheduling medical appointments or replenishing the toilet paper. The type of work that doesn't get noticed when it's been done, only when it hasn't. That everyone does invisible work. However, Melinda Gates points out in her documentary, Time Poverty, the gender gap no one's talking about, that in the entire world, there is not a single country where men spend as much time on invisible work as women. And as Eve Rodsky puts it in her book, Fair Play, when it comes to this type of work, you can't value what you don't see. So today, let's focus on the value of invisible work by first looking at its unseen history, the implications, and finally, the innovations. Now, this job jar has been around for a few years. It still smells like pickles and reeks of suburban child labor, but as it turns out, invisible work has been around for a long time as well. In fact, journalist Zoe Fenton states that this type of work is what keeps America going, but it hasn't always been invisible. In colonial times, all work was visible and considered valuable. According to Kathleen France, chair of the National Museum of American History, all members of the household worked and were compensated in similar ways, with food on the table and clothes on their back. This value was reported in the 1870 census, when keeping house, such as cooking and cleaning, was categorized as a profession. But when men began moving away from family-owned farms and into factory jobs, mining, and mill work, the visibility of work done at home by women began to fade. As noted in American University Magazine 2019, the decreased presence of men in the household decreased the visibility and value of housework. During World War II, women were needed to keep the American economy going. They began filling jobs men had left behind while maintaining workloads within the home. But by 1950, the US Census officially changed the definition of work. As shown here, now work around the house was explicitly marked as not counting, thus making it truly invisible. And as a result, the number of women in the workforce grew. And sociologist Arlie Hochschild coined the term the second shift to describe the invisible work women did when they returned home from their paid positions. By the year 2000, nearly 62% of American women were a part of this workforce. But this evolution of invisible work has led to some visible implications. By the time my little sister turned 5, I thought my job jar work would be cut in half. But the reality was she became invisible whenever there was work. And in a similar manner, the implications for both men and women surrounding invisible work is also due to the unequal distribution within the household, creating a loss of time, health, and income. Women still contribute to the most time spent on invisible work. According to Vice News, women in the US on average complete 4 hours of invisible work per day compared to 2 hours and 45 minutes for men. To put the magnitude of this into context, Oxfam executive and gender discrimination expert Helen Suzuki states, if one company was responsible for all of the invisible work done by women alone, it would be the world's largest company, 43 times bigger than Apple and worth $10 trillion. New York Times journalist and author Amy Westervelt created the Invisible Work Calculator. This online tool calculates the monetary value of time spent on invisible work such as scheduling, cooking, elder care, childcare, and many other forms of household tasks. Based on her calculations, the total time spent on invisible work in one's lifetime is equivalent to $53,228. The importance of this calculator is that without economic quantification, this work remains invisible. But the global pandemic is shining a light on the necessity of invisible work. NPR News states that in September, 850,000 women left their jobs in order to take care of children and other household needs. This number is 4 times larger than the number of men leaving for the same reason. Dr. Joyce Chen, professor of economics at Ohio State University, exemplifies this dilemma, that she had to put her career on hold in order to take care of the needs that had formed at home. An Oxfam report states that while all women are experiencing this, it is disproportionately affecting women of color. And the global pandemic is causing what was known as the second shift to be transformed into the triple burden, because women are now taking care of children, along with sick and elderly family members, on top of managing household tasks. For women, including Dr. Chen, this means increased stress, strained mental health, economic concerns, let alone sidelined careers. Now, my innovative way to deal with invisible work is by shoving it in my closet and closing the door. Invisible, but not effective. So let's take a look at how actual innovations are helping us see invisible work more clearly and how it's distributed. First, in terms of relationships. Bridget Schulte, director of the Better Life Lab, a center that is dedicated to work-life balance, explains, in same-sex households, invisible work is distributed in a more equitable manner. This is because of greater communication and fewer assumptions about who does what work based on gender. However, Dr. Gary Barker, CEO of Promundo, an organization dedicated to gender equality, explains in heterosexual households, the imbalance of invisible work can be addressed. If women commit to decreasing the amount of time they spend on household tasks by 50 minutes, and men commit to adding the same amount of invisible work to their day, a significant shift in balance and equity can be achieved. In the workplace, re-examining the value of invisible work is leading to the redistribution of caregiving. A CNN reporter, Josh Leps, has inspired innovation. When Leps became a parent and was denied paid parental leave beyond the traditional 2 weeks, even though birth mothers and men who are adoptive parents were offered 10 weeks, he filed a lawsuit and got results. The Time Warner Company, who owns CNN, responded by giving all parents 6 to 14 weeks of paid parental leave, regardless of gender. And Microsoft is also moving towards equity by offering birth parents 5 months of paid leave and all other parents 3. They are even extending their policies to include time off for elder care as well. And finally, Netflix is leading the way by offering all parents unlimited paid leave for the first entire year after childbirth or adoption. These innovative approaches allow for sharing both the physical and emotional load of invisible work. Today, we have gained a better understanding of invisible work by looking at its evolution, implications, and innovations. As I head to college next year, the job jar will be staying at home, but the tasks won't be going away. So I've graciously passed them off to my little sister. Yet the value of invisible work will always be with me.
Thank you, dear.
Great job, thanks. The time on that was 10:10. Okay. Judges, are we ready for the next one? Yes. Lots of good energy there. Okay. J4, Margaret.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes. Sorry, I called you Margaret. That is not your name.
That's okay.
I just made up a G. Merritt, you can go ahead and start whenever you're ready. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and go on mute.
Growing up, I was a huge fan of the TV show Here Comes Honey Boo Boo. The show followed 6-year-old pageant girl Alana Honey Boo Boo Thompson and her family's adventures. This family was the definition of redneck. Seriously, they created the Redneck Games, which was an annual event described as similar to the Olympics, but with a whole lot more missing teeth and a whole lot more butt cracks showing. The show also featured many delicious recipes, including sketty and ketchup, which was spaghetti and ketchup, or go-go juice, a mixture of Mountain Dew and Red Bull. Yum. The Thompsons also had a variety of pets, including a chicken named Nugget and a pig named Glitzy, both of which Alana faithfully protected because she literally thought her mom would eat them. This family and their endless antics was enough of a reason for 10-year-old me to tune in every week. Watching them was literally like watching a circus. However, years after Honey Boo Boo ended, stories surfaced about what went on behind the scenes. One thing that became clear was the overwhelming exploitation of this family on national television. According to a 2019 article from The Guardian, reality TV shows like Honey Boo Boo risk putting vulnerable people on a public stage at a point in their lives when they aren't able to foresee the consequences. And this is nothing new. The root of this voyeurism goes all the way back to Victorian-era freak shows, which were exhibitions of people that possessed unique characteristics. We loved these shows then, and we love them now. This modernization of the traditional freak show has created a culture of dehumanizing others for our own entertainment. So today, let's go juice back in time and look at the history of freak shows, then examine how they've evolved before finally redneckizing the impact of the modern freak show. Because the first episode of Honey Boo Boo may have aired over 8 years ago, but we have been promoting freak shows for centuries. First freak shows originated during 18th century Europe. At this time, scientists began focusing on biological classification, or categorizing all living things. The organisms that didn't fit into a specific category were labeled as Lucius Naturae, freaks of nature. Biologists would take their findings all across Europe and North America and showcase their cabinets of curiosities. And in time, humans with abnormalities were also grouped in, creating a whole new type of performance known as the freak show. And leading the rise in popularity of freak shows was none other than American showman P.T. Barnum. Barnum rose to fame with his introduction of Joyce Heth, the woman he claimed to be the 161-year-old nurse of George Washington. Now, Joyce created quite the stir, but the controversy was cleared up upon her death when the autopsy found that she was only 80 years old. Barnum's other acts included General Tom Thumb, a young boy who stopped growing at the age of 16 months, Myrtle Corbin, a young girl with 4 legs, and Josephine Clefula, a woman with a full-grown beard. But this is just a sampling of Barnum's acts. But perhaps his greatest success was the establishment of the American Museum in New York City in 1848. According to a 2017 Smithsonian Magazine article, Barnum's museum drew in more than 4,000 visitors per day to view some 850,000 curiosities at a price of 25 cents per trip. Clearly, this greatest showman was making more money than music. But in 1898, performers in London went on strike and demanded that freak be deemed an inappropriate term. The popularity of freak shows declined as the fight for disability rights began. Performers and audience members were understandably outraged. One performer stated in a 1900 New York Times interview, "My extra limb doesn't bother me as much as the curious, critical gaze." It became frowned upon to exploit the disabled in traditional freak shows, so we turned to newly developed TV and film to do the same. Over the past century, we've taken freak shows and rebranded them into forms we view as acceptable. One way we've done this is in the Guinness World Records, which includes their own designated category for the extremes of the human body. Take, for example, Lucky Diamond Rich, a man who recently earned the title of World's Most Tattooed Human, or Lee Redmond, world record holder for female with the longest fingernails on a pair of pants. Now, these are just two of the countless individuals who have unique characteristics and want to showcase them. Another way we've rebranded freak shows is in the rise of reality TV. These days, you can turn to any channel and find a couple fighting about nothing, a parade of sister wives, or a woman who's addicted to eating glass. And the best place to find all this at once? TLC, the Learning Channel. But, as writer C.C. Webster explains in a 2019 Huffington Post article, now TLC doesn't stand for anything. Instead, the program focuses on heterodox lifestyles and dysfunctional family life. Some of the shows on TLC include My 600-Pound Life, Little People, Big World, My Strange Addiction, Hoarding Buried Alive, and even Here Comes Honey Boo Boo. Our love of these shows does not go unnoticed. In 2019 alone, TLC reported over 3 billion viewers across 220 countries. It is all the same. We've traded the bearded lady for the mattress-eating mother, General Tom Thumb for Little People, Big World, the three-legged man for the 500-pound man. Watching these shows is not much different than sitting in the audience of a freak show. Now, in order to examine why we are obsessed with the weird and offbeat, we need to look no further than the only redneck to rival Honey Boo Boo, the Tiger King. In April, Netflix reported over 34 million people, myself included, streamed Tiger King within the first 10 days of its release. You can blame it on a pandemic, but we all collectively decided to watch 7 hours of Joe Exotic, a tiger-breeding, somewhat polygamous country music singer who also ran for mayor. Psychiatrist Dr. Lila Peachy examined why we watched Tiger King and shows of its type, and chalked it up to 3 reasons. The first being sensation-seeking. The second, schadenfreude, or deriving pleasure from someone else's misfortune. And the third, most important, downward social comparison, or looking down onto those we view as less powerful, less attractive, and less wealthy, in order to make ourselves feel better. We watch shows like Tiger King to feel validated and superior, just like the audiences of freak shows. And just like the many reasons Carol Baskin should be in jail, there are many negative impacts to the modern freak show. Our consumption of this entertainment does not go without consequences. For example, in 2019, British talk show The Jeremy Kyle Show was canceled after a guest died of suicide when he failed a lie detector test on live TV. Britain's media chairman stated in a 2019 BBC interview that guests on the show are predominantly poor, emerging from the shadows of broken Britain for their chance in the spotlight. Similar to freak shows' claim to educate, talk shows are often promoted as informative and entertaining, yet voyeurism, ridicule, and exposure better define the experience. The way we view people with physical disabilities is also affected. In 2017, social anthropologist Dr. Wednesday Martin discovered that wealthy mothers in Manhattan were hiring people with disabilities to pose as their family members in order to cut the lines at Disney World. One mother testified that she hired a person with disabilities to ride on a motorized scooter marked handicapped. They were immediately ushered to the front of every attraction. Society views people with disabilities as just their disability. This is even clear in the Guinness World Records. Labeling somebody as world's most shows that we only care about their unique characteristic, regardless of their personality. Gazing upon freak shows in the 1800s embedded a societal idea that people with disabilities are less than others, therefore dehumanizing them. After a recent rewatch of Here Comes Honey Boo Boo, I wasn't entertained. I was shocked. Turns out the go-go juice was just used to caffeinate Honey Boo Boo for filming, and Mama June's erratic behavior is now attributed to her use of opioids. And I now understand that my guffaws at their ramshackled home was nothing more than classism. This show, in short, is a modern freak show. I viewed Honey Boo Boo's family as entertaining and not an actual caring family. just like the audiences in the 1800s. This modernization of the traditional freak show has created a culture of dehumanizing others for our own entertainment. We need to start treating people with respect, because as Honey Boo Boo once said, pretty comes in all different sizes.
Thank you, dear.
Great job, thanks. The time on that was 9:42.
Reagan, can you give me a minute or two?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Up last, we have I4 Lucy. Looks like you're still on mute, Lucy.
Sorry about that. Can you see and hear
No,
me
no.
now?
Yes.
Perfect.
All right. And I'm going to go ahead and go on mute, and you can start whenever you're ready.
Sounds good. I am the least decisive person I know. And that's the one thing I'm actually sure about. So you can imagine how upset I was when my preschool bestie, Ellen, and I were playing Disney Princess Weddings at recess, and she told me, Lucy, you can't marry Aladdin, Eric, and Philip. You only get one. First of all, how was I supposed to choose between the three best princes? And second, why did Ellen think she could tell me what to do? Okay, so it turns out Ellen wasn't being bossy. She just had a better understanding of monogamy than I did. As the Cambridge English Dictionary generally defines it, monogamy is the fact or custom of having a sexual relationship or marriage with only one other person at a time. And this idea of monogamy is so ingrained within our lives that other practices may seem unfathomable. Even a preschooler understood it. I only get one. However, according to a 2016 study published in the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy, 1 in 5 people in the US alone engage in some form of consensual non-monogamous relationship throughout their lifetime. And as this relationship dynamic continues to become more and more prevalent, it's crucial that we take the time to understand both monogamous and non-monogamous relationships, and ultimately ask ourselves, why do we revere monogamy in the first place? So first, let's explore the origins of monogamy and its opposite, polygamy. Then, examine the shift to a predominantly monogamous Western society. Before finally, delve into the way monogamy acts as a weapon in our society. Because as author and scientist Robert Verbruggen once said, if we're not naturally inclined toward monogamy, why force the issue? Now, some of you might be wondering yourself, wait, Lucy, I thought monogamy was natural. And if so, you're in luck, because previously mentioned Robert Verbruggen has your answer in his 2016 article, creatively titled, Is Monogamy Natural? He explains that while monogamy does exist in some species, in general, nature is non-monogamous. For sexually reproducing species in terms of repopulating, The practice of polygyny, where one man has multiple female partners, is far more effective. And this can be traced to a single fact. There's just more sperm available than eggs. A male can father an almost unlimited amount of children, as long as there are enough females available. A female, by contrast, can max out her reproductive capacity with a single partner. But as we all know, us humans aren't the best at listening to science. So instead, relationship dynamics are largely decided by social groups. Religions play a major role in deciphering what relationship dynamics are deemed socially acceptable. And according to psychiatrist and philosopher Neil Burton, most countries that permit polygamy have Muslim majorities and usually only allow polygyny. He explains that under Islamic marital jurisprudence, a man can take up to 4 wives, as long as he treats them all equally. And while Islam allows polygamy, it does not impose it. Christianity, on the other hand, is a bit more restrictive, with most forms of Christianity confining marriage to a heterosexual and monogamous couple. Ironically, though, the Old Testament displays many multi-partner relationships, all of them being polygynous. But apart from religion, Burton notes that relationship dynamics can also arise based off circumstance, which is usually the case for the rarer practice of polyandry, where one woman has multiple male partners. He explains that polyandry is usually tied to scarcity of land and resources, like how it's found in the Himalayas, because it limits population growth. However, fraternal polyandry, where multiple brothers share the same wife as practiced in Tibet, is actually a way to protect a family's land from divisions. But whether we looked from science or social structures, it's clear that monogamy has not always been the norm. So why did Western societies make the switch? The simple answer comes down to one of my greatest weaknesses: basic mental math. According to biologist and evolutionary psychologist David P. Barash in his 2016 book Out of Eden, a common belief was that because there was about an equal ratio of males to females in the population, monogamy just made sense. But lucky for me, the rise of monogamy had a lot more to do with agriculture than math. As writer and historian Stephanie Buck explains in her 2016 article, "Blame Agriculture for Your Basic Sex Life," monogamy likely wasn't commonplace until the invention of private property. She explains that prior to the Neolithic Revolution, humans lived nomadic lifestyles, sharing everything, including sexual partners. But the discovery of agriculture during the Neolithic Revolution brought about a sedentary lifestyle, where suddenly owning land became valuable. But land wasn't the only thing now valuable to own. Women were. And this is where monogamy comes into play. Buck notes that women's leadership roles in their community shrunk, and they were isolated in a new patriarchy. Their bodies and babies mere chips in an agricultural economy. So it shouldn't come as a surprise when economist and professor at the University of Michigan, Ted Bergstrom, points out that the rise of monogamy primarily benefited men. He explains it helped assure men which children were actually theirs, and because of the traditional practice of primogeniture, where the firstborn son was to inherit their father's estate. It was kind of important for men to know who their kids were. Ultimately, it was a way for men to preserve their power from one male generation to the next. But despite the rise of monogamy, non-monogamous societies still exist. According to the 2020 World Population Review, as of 2020, polygamy is legalized in 58 out of 200 countries around the world. Here, the countries shown in blue represent where it's legalized, and in orange, decriminalized. Black, on the other hand, is where it is both illegal and criminal. Clearly, Western nations like the United States and European countries are where polygamy is least welcome. And these same Western nations are what many deem first world countries. We think them to be more civilized. And this is no coincidence. What else do all those Western nations have in common? A history of imperialism.
So it shouldn't come as a surprise when Dr. Kim Tolbear, a Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate professor, states that the enforcement of monogamy ties directly to colonialism and the upholding of white supremacy. According to the 2016 Utah Law Review, starting in the 1800s as imperialism gained traction, people began associating polygamy with barbarism and with being primitive and other. Monogamy, on the other hand, was seen as the civilized way. And colonists used this notion to argue that the polygamous indigenous nations they were colonizing were less than, and to ultimately justify their imposing of monogamy on these tribes. Dr. Tolbear explains that in America, each indigenous man as head of household was given a certain acreage of land fit for only one wife and their children. By denying the other wives land, they effectively imposed monogamy. Not only did this destroy the polygamous dynamics of so many indigenous people, but it destroyed the matriarchal structure that fueled so many indigenous tribes, now tying women economically to men. And according to Anna Clark in her 2016 book, The Rutledge History of Women in Europe, wealthy white European men openly took in mistresses throughout the 18th century, as it was deemed socially acceptable. Turns out the very legal practice these white male colonists were working to impose didn't reflect their own not-so-monogamous lives. And as convenient as it'd be to say that we've dramatically progressed in our notions, the truth is, we haven't. We still reinforce the idea that polygamy is primitive. One way we do this? We perpetuate the idea that women are somehow worse off in polygamous relationships. This is not to say that polygamous relationships can't be oppressive towards women, but rather that the very things we write off as purely problems of polygamy, jealousy, infidelity, and sexual violence, don't magically disappear when women are in monogamous relationships. Monogamy didn't protect women. It simply contained them. And by adhering to these ideas, too many have weaponized relationships, turning them into yet another source of oppression. So today, we explore the origin of monogamy and polygamy, examine the shift to a predominantly monogamous Western society, and finally, delved into the way monogamy acts as a weapon in our society. Hopefully, we have a better understanding of the complex nature of relationship dynamics, and maybe even challenge some preconceived notions along the way. And who knows, maybe one day a preschooler will be able to truly dream of being with their multiple Prince Charmings. Take that, Ellen.
Thank you, dear.
Great job. The time on that was 10:31. Good job, everybody. Congrats on making finals. You were all amazing. Yeah, good luck with the rest of your season. That's the whole round. We did it.
Thanks for managing things, Reagan.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good job, everyone.
Thank you for judging.
Thanks, Reagan. We appreciate it.